Hello there, Drew Hanish of Whiskey Lore. Time for another whiskey tasting. It is a black tie affair, so we've got a smoky whiskey today, but it's a smoky whiskey that is going to come from a place that you don't expect smoky whiskeys to come from, France. And so we're going to be doing a tasting of Armorique single malt. This is for a different product. It comes from the Varingame distillery, which is in Brittany. And this particular whiskey that we're going to be tasting is called Yuen Elez. And this is a heavily peated whiskey. And you may be going, wait a second, peated whiskey, France? Really? Are we talking about something real here? We are. And actually, you can take a look at it in my glass. I got a sample of this rather than getting a bottle of it, so I will show this off to you. Look how light in color that is. That is almost water. Yes, I mean, in terms of color, it is. But what does it nose and taste like? Now, if you want to learn a lot more about French whiskey, I'm going to be doing some additional tastings. I have as my guest on Wednesday's Whiskey Lore, the interviews, Christine Cooney, who is with Heavenly Spirits, which distributes French whiskey, cognacs, armagnacs, and wine across the United States. And so she was nice enough to answer the bell when I said, I want to learn more about French whiskey. Can you give me some French whiskey history? And she's from the cognac region of France. So she's going to dive in and give us a history of French whiskey. And interestingly enough, the French love single malt, and they are one of the biggest consumers of single malt, which you would think, wait a second, aren't they consuming all the wine and the cognac? And well, they love their single malts. So, and they usually would get their single malts like you and I from Scotland. But there is a real move in France right now towards distilling their own whiskey. And in fact, when you listen to the episode, you're going to find out there are a lot of distilleries in France. And I thought I knew how big the industry was, and Christine just blew my mind when she told me how many distilleries there are right now in France. And we're not getting a lot of it here, but this is one of the brands, and it is the oldest brand in France, coming from a distillery that was established in 1900, although they didn't actually start producing whiskey until 1987. So it's still a young industry over there, but if you think about it, Ireland, other than a couple of brands, is fairly new as well, and there are more distilleries in France than there are in Ireland right now. Believe that or not. In fact, twice as many, which again, that just blew my mind. So there is a French whiskey industry, and a lot of it is craft. This is the largest distillery in the country. You've probably seen Bastille. You've probably, and she'll talk about that because she distributes that as well. And you've probably seen Brenne, which is now a French whiskey that was created by an American who is now part of Heaven Hill. So you've probably seen that one in the store. I've had that one. It's a little sweet for me. And so I was a little bit skeptical once we started talking about French whiskey and what is this going to nose and taste like. But if you think about Brittany, and if you know geography, Brittany is a Celtic area, and it sits, if you're flying into Europe, it's in that northwest corner of France as you're coming in, slightly below Normandy, and it has a rocky terrain in some of those areas there towards the water, and gives you kind of a sense of being in the islands, being in Ireland, or being in Scotland. And so a lot of that personality actually ends up in the whiskeys, because I do pick up coastal notes in the whiskeys that I've had. Smoky, little smoky element that comes in on them as well. And some of that comes from the aging that they do in barrels that are actually using local oak, local French oak. So 46% ABV. This does use Scottish malt, even though France produces 30% of the world's barley. Yes, another reason that it's almost like a no-brainer. Why wasn't France making whiskey a lot earlier than this? And the first thing that you notice, well, you can hold it back here and you start picking up a little bit of the fruit. But as it comes closer to your nose, you pick up the medicinal, smoky, is very much like an Islay type smoke on this. And I was trying to think what distillery I think it would be closest to. In a way, it reminds me of, let's take Octomore and really lower the ppm on it and make it more of a gentle smoke with a lot of the fruit that comes in from underneath, the tropical fruit. You get that here. Kilchoman, you kind of get that kind of a smoke and nice fruitiness. And in a way, it actually sort of reminds me, that's got banana. Man, does that have banana. Maybe a little bit of a Highland, except that medicinal note comes in. And it's not an aggressive medicinal note. It's not like Glen Scotia 10 when it hits the end that you kind of get almost like a rubber tire kind of a note on it. No, this is just a nice, pleasant nose with that medicinal note. And I think it's the blending with the fruit that does this so nicely. Santé. I have so enjoyed this. I only got a little bottle, but I have really enjoyed it. The real prize comes when it first hits your palate. You get a maltiness. The smoke comes in. It is the same smoke you get on the nose, very reminiscent of an Islay smoke. A cocoa comes in, nice little chocolate note pops in there, and then it goes into a lemony malt. You get that lemon flavor that you sometimes get out of the malted barley grain. If there's a weakness in this whiskey, it's the finish. The finish is very clean, and the finish is peppery. There's a little pepperiness to it, a little spiciness to it, and that smoke is still there. A little bit of lemon, nice blend, but it thins out really quick. So like it gets to a certain point and then it's just like, whoa, where did it go? But the interesting thing about that is it makes me want to drink more, because I go, wow, that was great, wonderful experience, dissipated quickly. Gosh, I want more. So then I'm ready for another drink of it. So this is a very good whiskey, and I think you're going to be impressed by what we talk about on Wednesday. So I hope you join us for the Whiskey Lore, the interviews episode about French whiskey. If today's episode has been informative for you, I'd appreciate it if you would like the video. You can leave some comments below what your thoughts may be if you've had a French whiskey, or whether you're just like, whoa, you just want to leave some comments down there. You can do so. And like I say, it's a very interesting whiskey, and I think it would hold up if in a taste test with other Islay whiskeys. You might have a hard time picking this one out. So until next time, cheers and Slán Java. And Santé.